He's been called Islam's public enemy #1, and he lives every day under a death sentence from Al-Qaeda. But Geert Wilders says he won't back down.
Pat, he's a member of the Dutch parliament with a warning for his country and America. Eric Stakelback has his story.
Geert Wilders is a familiar face on the international stage, yet he and his wife must live in safe houses across the Netherlands. Al-Qaeda has declared a fatwa against him, so he never walks the streets without a security detail. It's the price he's paid for speaking out against the Islamization of Europe.
I don't want to live, and my children to live, in a country based on Sharia law. It's the worst thing that would happen. Democracy would end the day after Sharia was implemented.
In his new book, Marked for Death, Islam's War Against the West and Me, Wilders lays out his argument against Islam and multiculturalism.
If you walk to the streets of Amsterdam or Rotterdam or any other city in the Netherlands, you see that it has changed completely. People often don't feel at home anymore, don't feel safe anymore. There should not be Islamic schools. There should not be more mosques in our free society because they represent an ideology of hate to be compared with fascism and communism.
Wilders' message resonates with many Dutch who are fed up with massive Muslim immigration. His Freedom Party is now the third largest in Holland. His popularity only increased after he was found not guilty on hate speech charges in a Dutch court last year.
At the end of the day, what keeps you going, what keeps you doing what you do?
There is nothing more important than freedom and the freedom of speech. And I see, not alone with my own court case, but I see that it's changing for the worse in the Netherlands. And I believe that the biggest disease in Europe today is called cultural relativism. And I want to fight with all my life this misconception by politically correct, often liberal and leftist politicians who invented the multicultural society, that all cultures are equal.
Wilders calls them the facilitators, leftists who defend Islam while bashing Judeo-Christian civilization.
I'm proud to say that our culture, that is based on Christianity, on Judaism, on humanism, is not only better, far better than what I see as a barbaric Islamic culture, and that we should fight to preserve it.
He wants an end to Muslim immigration to the Netherlands, but says Muslims who assimilate into Dutch society are welcome.
The majority of the Muslims in our free society are not terrorists, are law-abiding people. Even though I don't believe that there will be any moderate Islam, there is only one Islam, let me tell you, and that is the Islam of the Quran, of the Hadith, of the Sirah, and of Muhammad. This is the only Islam. There are, however, people who don't live according to the life of Muhammad, who don't live according to the Sharia or the Quran. They are moderate, and I applaud that.
He maintains, however, that Islam and its teachings are the problem, not only for Europe, but for America as well.
Please don't make the mistakes we made. What is happening in Europe can very easily happen in America tomorrow.
Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
So warning, we'd better heed and we will ignore at our peril. This whole idea of multiculturalism, that all ideologies are equal, that Islam is equal to Christianity, it is not. It is not. What has brought us to this state of happiness in America has been the Judeo-Christian, biblically based values. What has brought desperation and poverty into the Middle East has been the teaching of Islam. Well, you can always get the latest on radical Islam by checking out Stakelbeck on Terror on CBNNews.com. Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee, what do you have?
Pat, Indiana voters rejected 7-term incumbent Senator Richard Lugar in yesterday's Republican primary. State Treasurer Richard Murdoch will now be the GOP Senate candidate from the Hoosier State.
I hope that Richard Murdoch prevails in November so he can contribute to that Republican majority in the Senate.
To those people who are conservatives, who for the first time in their lives, perhaps in the last 2 or 3 years, decided to step out of their comfort zone and start working, some under the umbrella of the Tea Party, other names apply, other conservative groups. Those people around this country are wondering if they can do the impossible. My friends, tonight you demonstrated it is possible.
Many Tea Party members supported Murdoch, and they said Lugar had become more interested in compromising with Washington liberals than representing conservatives back home. And Pat, yesterday's race wasn't even close.
Well, I tell you, it's a shocker to me because Richard Lugar was a fixture in the Senate. He's a very able person. He was an expert on foreign policy and a very good friend. But, you know, he'd been there for many, many years, and the problem was that he didn't live in Indiana. He didn't have a residence in Indiana. I mean, for 35 years, he lived in the District of Columbia. And I mean, sooner or later, you've got to have a base in your home state. And if you don't, you're in trouble. Well, he was in trouble. And, you know, I guess when people reach a certain age, it's time to see them retire, and they go on into the sunset. And, well, let's look now at what happened in North Carolina, because the voters, it wasn't a shock down there, but it was rather interesting. Lee?
That's right, Pat. The voters in the Tar Heel state have approved an amendment to their state's constitution that defines marriage as a union only between a man and a woman. Amendment 1 passed with 61% of the vote. It bans civil unions as well as same-sex marriage. North Carolina is the 30th state now to pass a state amendment protecting traditional marriage. The issue has become a hot topic for many Democrats in recent days. Vice President Joe Biden supports gay marriage, but the president says his position is evolving. Many liberals have criticized him for not taking a clear stand. Experts say the only way to fight the country's growing obesity epidemic is to change the way Americans live, radically. The Institute of Medicine released a 400-page report outlining 5 key recommendations to battle the bulge. They say Americans need to be physically active every day, that healthy food options need to be available everywhere, from schools to restaurants, and that marketers need to do a better job advertising healthy lifestyles. They also recommend health care providers and employers do more for obesity prevention, and that schools focus on preventing childhood obesity. Pat, one of the concerns that a lot of conservatives have about this, they agree that there is a problem, but most of this seems to focus on government responsibility rather than personal responsibility.
Well, it has to be personal, but of course, with advertising as pervasive it is, that kids are sold a bill of goods. I know the man who invented the Happy Meal. Little kids will just insist on a Happy Meal if it's full of French fries and greasy foods and so forth. But one of the sort of dirty little secrets about this is the lawyers have clamped down on play in playgrounds. And they say, if somebody gets a broken arm in your playground, you're going to get sued. So the schools say, well, let's just cut out recess and play. When I was a kid, we used to go out, they'd ring a bell, and we'd go out and we'd play football, and we'd do this, that, and the other. I got a broken nose, as I recall, playing football.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, you didn't catch it, Pat?
I didn't catch it.
Well, you caught it, just in the wrong place.
Yeah, I tackled somebody and broke my nose.
Broke your nose.
Well, I think it got broken. I never had it fixed, but I was pretty sure it was. But that was what we used to play, yeah. And you had fights, and you had wrestling, and you went running back and forth. And now they've cut it out because they say the schools will get sued. They need to have 1 hour a day of physical exercise for those kids.
That's true. Not all schools have, cut it out, though. So my son, he still plays all the time. He's forever talking about recess. Every time he comes home from school, I'm like, what's your favorite part of school? He goes, recess.
Does he play stuff out at recess?
He does. He plays Up a Storm. I mean, that kid, he's a boy. I used to play all the time, but here's the key, too. When I went home, not just at school, but as soon as school was over, I used to beg my mom, can I go out and play? And in fact, she was like, yeah, go, go, go. And I think a lot of kids now are coming back playing video games when they just need to run around and get all that energy out and have a good old time.
They're even getting
tendinitis
right
on their thumbs.
In their thumbs. Lee, what's next?
Well, Americans came together in Washington Tuesday in a prayer service for the nation. It commemorated the 223rd anniversary of George Washington's first inauguration as the president of a new nation. John Jessup has that story.
Against the Grand Colonnade and the statues in the Old House Chamber,
Heavenly Father,
prayers and songs.
You can have all this world. Just give me Jesus.
Echoed in the heart of the nation's capital in a service commemorating the 223rd anniversary of George Washington's first inauguration as the president of a new nation.
He was exceptional. He was an American. He was a man of prayer.
Speaker Boehner approved the use of this room, Statuary Hall, for the ceremony. It has historical significance for events like these. At one time, organizers say it hosted Washington's largest church.
Preachers of every Christian denomination preach Christian doctrine in this chamber, right here where we sit.
Discussing the economy, morality, and a broken political system, Speaker said the country has gone astray.
Many of us believe that America is at its darkest moment. But I want to be the contrarian here. God ain't through with America yet.
This event proves that we still at the core, no matter who says otherwise, are a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My husband and I both have so wanted to do something for our country, and we didn't know what. How does one person do anything? They pray.
But not everyone was thrilled, citing concerns about the separation of church and state.
I don't think that government really ought to be sponsoring or hosting any types of religious services, whether they be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, or even atheist events, and that's just not the government's job to do.
But for the attendees, the ceremony was about prayer for recovery and renewal.
There is no problem that this nation faces that cannot be solved by prayer.
John Jessup, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Ben, it looked like a great ceremony.
It looks that way. You know, there used to be a church service that met there in the rotunda, as I call, once a week, and all this nonsense about separation of church and state that you hear today didn't happen in those days. They didn't think about it because they knew we were one nation under God.
California lawmakers are considering a ban on psychological therapy that attempts to make gay people straight. It's called conversion therapy, and homosexual activists don't like it. A bill in the California legislature would prohibit the therapy for minors, and it would require adults to sign a release saying they're aware the counseling is ineffective and possibly dangerous. Religious groups, though, say the ban would interfere with parents' abilities to seek appropriate psychological care for their children. Artist Thomas Kinkade died from an accidental overdose of alcohol and prescription tranquilizers. An autopsy reveals Kincaid's heart was so enlarged he had been vulnerable to a fatal heart attack at any time. The self-described painter of light died on April 6th at the age of 54. He struggled with personal issues in recent years. He broke up with his wife 2 years ago, and one of his companies filed for bankruptcy. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.